Lion. Hey guys. Oh, we are live. Welcome everyone to the very first Data God Lunch and Learn. This is a brand new series that I'm super excited to get started with because I want to take this time because this data world is rapidly evolving. Tech is changing, new things and new capabilities are coming into play. We're seeing all new sorts of processes and tools to help us build better, do more with our data. And one of the biggest ones that I've been super excited about working with in my career right now is at least new has been dbt. dbt is really transforming the way we're working, and we are lucky enough today to have with us Jacob Matson, who frankly has blown me away over the last half hour with some of the stuff you showed me. I'm so excited to get into what we have today. So, Jacob, why don't you introduce yourself?
Cool. Yeah, thanks, Chris. I really appreciate it. Yeah. So, hey, everybody. I'm Jacob Matson. By day, I run ops and finance at a company called Symmetric. We build an IoT data management platform. And by night, spend a little bit of time in the open source software world, kind of being the voice of Microsoft to some extent, as on data Twitter, in the crossover, the small crossover, the dozens of us that use SQL Server and dbt together, among other things. So yeah, excited to be here.
Oh well, let me tell you, I'm very grateful for you to take your time out of your day and run through this. I think it's just a really exciting topic. Sound is a little bit choppy, so we're just gonna have to muddle through this. We thought we had this straight out right before it went live, but 3 seconds before we started to get a little choppy again. But I'm sure we'll be able to get through this one. So before we dig into the demo, and I really do want to get into the demo, Jacob, can you just explain at a high level what is dbt? Why the heck do I care about dbt? What should I be doing with it? That type of thing.
Yeah, so dbt stands for Data Build Tool. It comes out of a company called dbt Labs. And I'll kind of explain how I started with it and go from there. So, I've been using SQL Server for probably the last 8 years in various modes of production, analytics, prod apps, that kind of stuff. And as part of that, I think we're all pretty familiar with the stored procedure paradigm, right? You can set these things up. They run on a cron or, based on triggers or whatever, depending on your architecture. And as I started hearing about dbt, what I came to realize is that, okay, hang on, dbt actually lets me take these kind of pretty onerous stored procedures and break them apart and run them in a way that's a little more governed. I can commit them to source control, for example. Not that you can't do that with SQL Server, but it's a little bit janky compared to normal software engineering workflows. And so that was the first bit, was how do I kind of do this in a scalable, sustainable way? And the second part was, as you kind of can break these apart, you can actually run them on multiple threads. So part of what the first mind-blowing moment for me was taking a stored procedure that took probably took 15, 20 minutes to run, and kind of breaking it apart so that a bunch of pieces could be run in parallel, and changing it, now it runs in 20 seconds, right?
Wow.
So that was part where I was like, oh, holy crap. If I actually kind of break this apart and let it let kind of the dbt DAG parallelize everything, I get a ton. I can run this whole thing. I can use the processing power that's available to me way better. And so that was kind of the initial journey into it. But really what it is it's a way to orchestrate your data flows, but just inside your database, right? It's not a broad database or like a orchestration tool like Airflow, for example. It's really only focusing on things inside your database. So that's how I think about it. As a SQL Server user, I just think about it. It's a way better way for me to build stored procedures that take my data from kind of raw formats and transform it.
Oh, yeah, and I think you're precisely right. One of the things that I really appreciate about oh no, you did the exact thing. I completely forgot about this. As we dive into this, we're going to do a new tradition. Let's get, this is a lunch and learn, right? So raise your glass, raise your whatever it is you have that you're doing today. So let's take a sip and let's dive into this stuff. So.
Perfect.
All right, good. Because this should be educational, but should be fun and engaging. So good. The thing that, along with what you're saying, the thing that I really appreciated when I saw my first demo of dbt was how easy it was to take a data validation script and drop it into a folder in dbt so that you know that that's going to run as part of your pipeline.
Exactly.
Yeah, I because for me, one of the most important topics that we talk about is the quality of the data in your system. Because if people don't think the data is right, they're not going to use your data. You want the surest way to see a project defunded or any data project is to have crappy data, right? Like,
absolutely.
That is a path out of there, right?
I'll pull on that thread a little bit because part of what I was working on at the same time too with SQL Server is this package, this open source package called tsqlt, which is unit testing for T-SQL, and it was just, I was really struggling with it, and so at the same time I discovered dbt, and I was like, oh, perfect, right? Like, how do I make sure my stuff is right? Especially when you're working in scenarios, especially in data warehouses, right? You're not enforcing primary keys, as an example. So what if you get duplicate data in there? How do you handle it? All that type of stuff. dbt helps you handle that, automatically. Instead of running a pipeline, your entire pipeline with bad data, it'll stop it, things like that.
Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly, because that, hey, do you have a duplicate key, is a completely foreign topic to people. If you come from like a hardcore relational database, like if you've only worked in
That's
SQL,
right.
Like, of course, you defined a primary key. Why wouldn't that be my primary key? Why would there be duplicates? Oh, because we're working in a massively parallel, distributed processing system, and keys inherently cannot be enforced, right? So you end up having to implement all these workarounds and tests that if people are not conscious of it, they don't do it. And if they go back to try to add it in, it's very hard for them to add in, right? So,
yeah, I always like to make the joke that, like, the best way to double your revenue is to put your accounting data in a data warehouse. So.
Oh, I like that one.
There you go.
I just saw there's a plugin to like automatically stitch and tweet out something. So I'm going to have to come back and clip that. That's going to be a highlight. The best way to double your revenue for any organization is to put your accounting data into a data warehouse. I love it. That's fantastic.
All right. We're going to try to avoid that. Yeah.
Okay, so that's fantastic. Now, before we dive into things, I do want to let everyone know, please, if you have questions, Q : followed by the question, we're happy to bring that in and have that as part of the conversation. So we're going to be going into the demo. Do feel free to Jacob, don't worry, I'll be watching the queue, so you can focus in on your demo and going through the data that's there. All right.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Do we want to head over then?
Yep, let's share the screen.
All right. Switching. There we go. Okay, your screen is up.
Cool. All right, so I'm in VS Code here. By the way, this repo is on GitHub. We'll share the link at the end. You can see this. You can interact with it. You can use it. It's pretty neat. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to get the Docker container running SQL Server. So
hang on one second. I want to take just a break because a lot of people that are accustomed to my channel may not be familiar with Docker. Can you give us a brief rundown of what Docker is, what the heck a Docker container is and why would I need a Docker container with my dbt?
Yeah, sure. So in this case, I'm just using the Docker container to hold SQL Server, so I don't need to do a full install of it when I do this demo. It's really great for doing things like local testing, right? So like, for example, in the dbt SQL Server adapter, there's a whole bunch of tests that pull down the SQL Server image, and then you can actually run a bunch of automated queries, make sure all the tests pass, so that as you build out things, you can be confident that things work. Really, where you'll see Docker in production, kind of in non-test scenarios, is it lets you kind of build a microservice architecture. I'm not going to focus on that bit of it. This is really just for convenience for me. So from a fundamental standpoint, there's Docker images that we're going to pull down and run as basically a little container, a little VM on our machine.
Okay, fantastic. So just to summarize, because we're having some issues with the mic, I'm just going to run through and because I'm not 100% sure on the Docker thing, so Jacob, I'm going to try to explain it, and then you tell me if I summarize what you said correctly or not. Okay.
Perfect. That sounds good.
Awesome. So a Docker and a Docker container allows you to basically spin up application services or content inside that container, so you don't necessarily have to be running that content all of the time yourself. That ensures that you have all of the code, all of the scripts in place to automatically be able to scale up, scale out, and roll out new solutions, which other people have already created, so you don't necessarily have to worry about, like, how do you create a Docker container for SQL, because that's something Microsoft has already done, and you could just use
Correct.
the code that is already out there. Am I close?
Yes, 100%.
Awesome.
There's a lot more to it than that, that we could really get into. You can spend whole shows talking about it, but that is a great summary.
That's the short and sweet for the purposes of this video. So you've spun up a
Absolutely.
SQL Server Docker, or you have a Docker with SQL Server. You're about to spin that up. Yes.
So the first thing I'm doing is actually downloading the image, and then we'll use the image to serve the container, right? So this is using the Docker pull command, and then it's getting this image that Microsoft has conveniently, made available to us.
Okay.
So we're getting it.
So it's loading. Here we go. Download.
Okay, so we have our image. We've got it, and now I can run it. I'm just going to call it a few things. So with Docker, you pass in these environmental flags, and then those get used kind of by the image. So what I'm doing is saying, hey, accept that you use this password, like on the SA account, right?
Okay.
Not best practice here, but for the purpose of the image, it's fine. Let's publish this port. So what this says is, on the VM, make this port on the VM match this port on the local host.
Okay.
And then we give it a name and a host name, and then we say, use this image that we just downloaded to build the whole thing. So I just copied that. I'll run it. We're running. So I'm going to use this command called docker ps just to check the status of it. So we can see it's been created and it's up, and this port is available. So that's pretty neat. I'm just going to connect to it in SSMS because we got to create a database on it as a kind of first step here. Let's just make sure, we're in. Let's run it. Execute. Perfect. All right, so we just spun up a brand new SQL database, and we created this test DB database, right?
Okay.
So that's where we're at. Sweet. All right. So the next thing is I'm going to just kind of show the dbt profile. So what the dbt profile is it's basically in SQL Server land, it's what builds your connection string.
Okay.
Right? So what you'll see is I have my dev credentials right here that are going to be used by dbt. So it says, hey, use the SQL Server, use this driver. It does support 17 and 18.
Okay.
You might support 16 also if you have if you're running that version. Tell me how many threads to run. I'm running on 24, so it'll be nice and fast. I think the general rule of thumb with dbt on SQL Server is like 2 threads per core is kind of safe. Just so obviously I'm running this locally. I've got a beefy I've got a beefy processor, so might as well take advantage of it.
Go for
And
it,
then this
right?
is the database we yeah, exactly. This is the database we just created, right? Now, obviously, keeping these credentials kind of, unfiltered here on in our profile, not best practice. So I also have my prod connection, and then what I'm doing is taking advantage of the environmental variables inside of GitHub to store what my server is, what my username and password is, right?
Okay.
And we'll talk more about this later when we get into the GitHub action piece of it. So, but we're going to be using these credentials here, but these are identical. You just have to set up your credentials there. All right.
Okay.
All right. So this is how we connect. By the way, I talk to a ton of people, and they get stuck on this step. This is kind of a great sample version of what you can use to connect to your dbt project the first time.
Okay. So I think I really like to call out those pieces, right? Like this initial configuration, it can be very tricky. Let me actually do a zoom in. So the comments and questions were like, is it, I know you mentioned this in code before, that everything you have here is in GitHub, GitLab,
GitHub, yep.
GitHub.
Yep.
We'll get links out and all that stuff. But here's the actual configuration that you need to have with the variables that you have to enter in order to make this work, right?
That's right. Yeah, exactly right.
Awesome.
This is tried and true. It'll work. You can use the Docker container. It may work on prod depending on, this is using obviously SQL Server authentication, right? Not Windows Auth or Active Directory or anything like that.
Okay.
So obviously different config if you've got different authentication to your SQL Server.
Okay, awesome.
All right. So we have our profile. Really cool. So now what we can do is we can actually run the project. And so what the project looks like, let me just collapse all of these things. Okay. So these are kind of the default folders that are in here. What we really care about is models. So at dbt, like a table or a view in dbt is called a model. Okay. So when you see people talk about models in dbt, what they mean is a table or a view. dbt has four kind of different versions of models, right? So they've got tables and views. They also have this notion of ephemeral tables, which aren't great for SQL Server, by the way, because all they do is wrap your model in a CTE and let you use it downstream.
Okay.
So if you're using, a common table expression, SQL Server, the way that the planner works, you have too many CTEs, so it can get a little bit hairy.
A quick pause there. You hit on a couple topics that I also want to make sure we illustrate. And a CTE, right? Create table expression, right? So it creates a table as an expression, so it actually materializes the table, right?
Yeah. No, so CTE, like a common table expression, and so like something like this, right? So a with statement right here, right? So saying, hey, with this thing, right? So I don't have to. Sorry, I'm giving it like a nice friendly name, right? I don't need to pull necessarily the whole table. In this case, it is,
right,
as an example. But so it creates a view kind of in your query, more or less is how I think about CTEs.
Okay, cool.
So,
and then you also said this is a new type of model. So now we have, if you're in the Power BI and data world, we've got data models, which are like classically how you would lay out your schema, so like a star schema or a third normal form schema.
Yep.
Now this data model is, every table is considered to be a model. Am I right?
Yeah.
Table or view?
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, correct. So you kind of got to figure out your
nomenclature here
there, so it all makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. And then in the Power BI world, we've got data models, which are also now called data sets. All right. And in the data science world, you can have data models, which are scientific logarithmic expressions. Okay.
Yeah. So dbt models.
Thanks, everybody.
Are a distinct table or view. They also support this notion of incremental tables in dbt. I don't really use them that much in general. They're they're really handy in for materializing big tables, but your mileage may vary.
Okay.
So those are the 4 types of models in dbt. So we have also this notion of seeds that I want to call out. So typically your project would be, let's say, pulling data from a data lake or from another SQL server, depending on your architecture. And in this case, we're using what's called a seed in dbt. And what a seed in dbt is, it's just a CSV file that you can load into a table. So we've got our raw customers, we've got our raw orders, we've got our raw payments. And what dbt will do is just load these into SQL Server as part of the build step.
Okay. All right.
So this whole project self-contained because all of the initial data, these 3 data sets, are all baked in the seeds folder.
Okay. All right, cool.
Yep. All right. So we're going to run dbt build. Let's see if I can type. See if it kicks off here. And so it's going to run. Great. We just ran 28 models.
Okay.
And
28 tables. Got it.
We've got views, 20 tests.
Okay.
And 2 table models, right?
Let me hold on.
So
Let me zoom in on
cool.
that so we can get a look at that.
Oh yeah.
Okay. All right. So we see that it created all these things passed super fast, right?
Yep.
Fractions of a second. We see that 28 were created with no issues, no warnings, no errors. Okay, cool.
Yep. All green. Love it.
Yep.
And assuming that there's a bunch of tests in here, right? Checking to make sure things are not null. Do we have unique order IDs? All this other stuff.
Oh.
Right? And if any of these fail, so these are all baked in.
They're baked in. Did you have to do anything to create that, or they're just part of dbt? These data checks.
So these tests are part of dbt, but you have to explicitly invoke them. And so how I'm doing that here is, so for example, in the model called customers, we have a column called customer ID, and we're testing to make sure that test is unique and not null for that column.
Oh my God, I love this.
So we're defining it in YAML, right? And then dbt does all the translation to say, well, that means run this SQL query. So for example, I'm just gonna, we'll jump into this for a second here.
Mm-hmm.
So I can actually look at the models that were run. Where are my tests? Here we go. All right. So let's look at one of these customer tests, not null customer ID. So it just runs this. It ran this SQL on our database.
Wow.
And basically, so this is procedurally generated. All I had to do to invoke this is, oops, I just double click on that, is go to my schema. Here it is, right here, right? So I just define it with this, say, in the scope of this column on this model, use these tests, and it will generate that SQL.
Wow. Wow. So you didn't have to write any of that SQL. What if I wanted to write a custom SQL? Could I just how does that work?
Yeah, so absolutely. So dbt has this notion of what are called macros, and so you can write custom test macros. In fact, I use them. One of the common ones that I use is a test for an empty table.
Sorry, you broke up right there. It was a test for a what?
Empty
table. Got it.
Yep. So hang on, let me check one thing on my team settings. Hang on. I think I actually might know what's going on with the mic. I'm going to turn my noise suppression off.
Okay,
we'll see if this works better. Who knows?
Fingers crossed.
All right. Yeah, exactly. So no, I didn't have to do any of this, but yeah, so a common test that I create as a custom test is empty tables. So I want to make sure that I don't have an empty table, because sometimes, especially if you're doing multiple tests on a data set, all of the default dbt tests give you an error if more than one record is returned, right?
Okay.
So if the problem is, if my table is empty for some reason upstream, all of my tests will say, yeah, those look great. But the reality is, my table is empty, so I have an empty table, one that I use all the time. So yeah, you can make custom tests. Lots of examples of how you can do that. You can even do custom models as tests, right? So you can do a very complex view that says, hey, if this view returns any records, it's a fail, right? And so that's a common way to do that too, especially on like more complex analytical models where you want to make sure like all your numbers fit or things aren't counted multiple times, that kind of stuff. You can do very, very complex tests. We're not going to touch on that here, but
That's fine. And yeah, we don't necessarily have to go deep into that, but this looks like this is all in line with the load. It'll run all these tests. Does dbt have what's that?
Nope, you're good. Go ahead.
Okay. So does dbt have the concept of like an offline test so that like these run on build, but you will be part of that build process. So if they, you can't have anything that runs too long, it's just going to do some basic tests. If you need to do a deeper dive integration test, like maybe the case notation is maintained appropriately or something along those lines from a source system, and it takes an hour to run those tests. Do you have the ability in dbt to have that offline test or no?
Yeah, so dbt has kind of 4 ways that I run those kind of longer running tests.
Okay.
So the first way that I'll call out is on run start. So that means when you run dbt or do a dbt build in the case that I just shown in the example, it'll do something. You can have it run arbitrary SQL.
Okay.
Now you can also do, of course, on run end, right? So once everything is done, run this stuff, right?
Okay.
The other way to do it is on every specific model is you can use what are called post and pre-hooks, right? So a pre-hook lets you run arbitrary SQL before the model runs, a post-hook runs after the model runs.
Okay.
Right. So you can kind of stick these kind of deeper tests in different places. Of course, obviously, if you're using kind of like a Airflow or something for running a larger DAG, you can use dbt or not to run those in other ways, right?
Okay.
Right. But yes, the way that so what's interesting is I would say in terms of tests, that's really where I get to think about use some of my query optimization chops, right?
Sure.
All right, because I want these tests to be fast, so I definitely am thinking about making them as fast as possible when I'm writing them, so that I can ideally inline as much as possible.
Yeah, 100%. You want to have it in line so nothing gets out. Just I wanted to make sure that there was an option for that offline deeper test. So this is fantastic. Awesome.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So since we've run the project, let's look at the data that was created. So I'm actually using SQL Tools, which is a plugin for VS Code. And
Okay.
It actually has a nice adapter for SQL Server. So we're going to connect. And so just open a little window for me here. So we can do something like this, right? Select one, and it's actually going to run the query in SQL Server.
Wow.
Right? Very, very neat. Now, also, it has the catalog. So here's all of the tables and views we just created, right?
Okay.
So we can do something like this. We can do select star, or let's just has a nice little autocomplete run. Look at that. Our customers table is here. Pretty neat. Got some basic stats. Awesome.
Yeah, this is fantastic.
So we can inspect that. We can write custom SQL. Anything you can write SQL here, or you can do. We can do, let's do orders. On, I don't know. Let's see, order. It's probably customer ID. Orders. Ooh, I can't type. If this works. Hey, look at that. So we just, obviously this is kind of a lame query, but there we go. We have a join working, it's just running right locally. Super cool.
Right.
And you can do things like export it and things like that if you feel so inclined. All right. So that's that bit. We can now see our models. I'm actually going to, one thing I really love about dbt is it has this notion of documentation that gets built. So
what?
This file here.
Hang on? Did you talk with Johnny about coordinating this about documentation ahead of time? He just posted a question in the chat about like, gee, wouldn't it be great if you could have documentation on this stuff? So
that's funny. So yeah, So this kind of schema YAML file actually gets picked up by this dbt docs generate and puts it in a nice organized status. Now this is like a test project dbt folks built, right? So it has very, very nice documentation, right? You got to build your own. That's all. We don't, unfortunately, doesn't absolve us completely of writing docs, but at least it makes it simpler. So let me show you what that means. So I'm going to I just use this code called dbt docs generate, this command here. So I'm going to do dbt docs serve, and what's going to do is actually going to spin up a little Python server locally and give me my docs. How cool is this? All right. So we can look at our models here.
Mm-hmm.
Here's our customer table, and what it tells us is here's a description, right? That comes from that YAML file. Here's a description of these columns. It tells me what tests. This has a unique and a not null test on it, right? Here's some other information. What's the value of the customer order in Australian dollars, apparently? What test does it reference? What does it depend on? What other models? What does the code look like, kind of in dbt Ionic code, right?
Okay.
Where it has this Jinja in here for the reference. And then we say, well, what does it look like when it's compiled? Okay, so this is the actual SQL that's getting run. So that's pretty neat. And then I'm going to show this too. It has this really awesome lineage graph. I love this because one of the challenges I run into with stored procedures is they're referencing all this stuff, and like sometimes you need to make a very small fix.
Right.
And what you have to, the first thing you have to do is understand how the entire thing works, and then say, okay, now I want to make this one small change. And what this lets me do, let me just take this out, take this filter out. So this lets me see all of the data in SQL Server. So I can say, okay, well, how do these relate to each other? So I can see this orders table comes from payments and orders, and customers, takes a look at, looks like it's aggregating a bunch of other stuff. So it's coming from these three tables. I'll go to the customer table, right? So I know if I make a change kind of upstream of this, hey, a change to the payments table might impact my customer model.
This is fantastic. So, quick question, or just verification. This is automatically generated as part of dbt. You didn't have to go through and document all this stuff. You didn't have to create and update a diagram on every time a database is created, right? This is just automatically done. Yes.
Yeah. So when you use Jinja to do reference tables, it builds the DAG behind the scenes, right? So it builds the graph, so it knows which things need to be executed in which order, right?
Right.
Oops. Let me go back to here. So one thing that's really cool too about this that I'll show is it has a selector down here. What we can do is we can actually use graph operators in it. So if I want to see everything that's downstream of raw payments, I can just do raw payments plus, and it'll just filter everything that's downstream of that.
Okay, so
what things are impacted by?
Oh, hang on a second here. Just I want to highlight how easy that was. You just went down to, there's a little search bar on the bottom of your window here.
Yeah,
a little small right here. Yeah, it's a selector right down here. You search for a field name, and then boom, you just came up with all the tables that were relevant to it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a model. It's actually a model name. So this filter here is on models.
Oh, okay, models.
So I'm saying use the model name payments and find everything that's downstream of it.
Yeah.
So what's really cool about this is I can do something like, okay, show me. You can go. It's bidirectional, so I can do like this, customer. So this one at the front of it lets me say, show me everything that's one step upstream of customers. So I can do like, so now I have the whole thing, everything upstream of customers. Now if I just want to see one step, I put the one there. So you can use these graph operators really, where they help is especially when we all have pipelines and they break. And what I love about dbt is I think it probably saves me, I don't know, it's probably something that took me an hour, probably takes 5 minutes now with dbt, because I can get right to the part where I have an issue and make the change very atomically and then test it, because I've got a bunch of tests built in, right? So I have more confidence that these changes that people are relying on this data to make decisions, I can be confident that I'm not going to break their trust.
Yeah, and maybe some of you on the live stream have been through this before, but everything's running fine, and then all of a sudden 3-6 months from now someone discovers an issue in the output. You've got all these tests and whatnot that are in place, but now some upstream change has occurred that causes muckabuck to happen, right? And then tracing it through from like, oh, well, I go from this table back to this one, right? Like you run through this rabbit hole warren of trying to figure out where it went wrong or why it's not right. That can take
yes.
That could take days, weeks, months, right? Trying to like figure it out, and then the source system updated, and then now it looks right. But did you get it right, or did it rerun right? Like, or do you still have the issue and it's now something else, right? Like, it can be incredibly challenging. But this now, forget about it. Now you can clearly see orders dependent upon stage payment and stage orders. Okay, right?
Yep.
And if you have a bigger, more complex graph, it allows you to easily highlight those items and filter it out, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, this is a very small graph, but yes, it rapidly gets complex. Figuring out where your dependencies are. Oh, hey, that guy over there made a change that impacted me. This adds clarity to all of that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's really neat. That just automatically generated. You can see, here's our little server that was running. All right, we'll exit it. All right, so one thing that comes up, especially with SQL Server folks, is like, okay, Jacob, this is really cool, but I use the SQL agent to like run all my, run my pipeline. And that's not baked into dbt, which is true. Now, the first thing is you can actually invoke this, if you feel like on a cron from PowerShell, for example. But the way I want to show you, which is really neat, is actually, I'm just going to touch on it briefly because it doesn't work at the moment. My fault. But I have, in this project, I actually have GitHub Actions set up so that when you do specific things in the project, the pipeline runs automatically. Okay. So I'm going to just drill down on those actions. And for those of you that don't know what GitHub Actions are, is it's basically a way to run scheduled jobs from GitHub. Okay, so you can run those when certain events happen in your project, i.e., do CI/CD, or you can run a cron, right? So, for example, here's a scheduled run. So it's running every day on the 13th hour, and you can see here's my environmental variables. I'm passing my secrets in, and then it's just checking out the latest branch. You'll see my main branch is called duckdb because I forked this from the duckdb repo. And then so that's why you see that there. It's getting my dependencies, and then it's running the build.
Okay.
And this little target flag tells me use the profile prod, which is defined here, right? That's this profile. So let me go back to that. Schedule run. Okay, so we've got this one that runs on a schedule, right? This kind of like the SQL agent. We can also run it from GitHub using this workflow dispatch, right? So you can actually click on the button and run it. And then lastly, we have whenever there's a pull request, run this. Okay.
Okay.
So that's pretty cool, especially if you're doing something like around blue-green deployments or something like that, right?
Right.
This one's actually not set up right. It's got the wrong branch on it, but I'll fix it and we'll share the link. So these are all working. What's really cool about this is because I can pass the environment here, right? I could set a target test, let's say. And then what that would do is it could build this whole thing in a test database, which then I could like dispose of at the end or whatever, right?
Oh.
Right. Or like, one thing you can do depending on how, data engineering you want to get, you can actually use the Docker container that I started with at the very beginning, spin up a brand new SQL Server instance, pull all your data into it, run your tests, and then throw it away, right?
Oh my gosh, so you could really do deep dive integration testing all dynamically with all fresh resources that you spin up in code and then load and manage through dbt and Git. Wow.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. This opens the door for those type of workflows.
Yeah.
And just, so you can see it, I'll show this real quick. So you can see here's my GitHub runner running locally. Unfortunately, not working. I do need to fix it. But I'll just show the quick demo while we're here. Where did my tab go? Okay, I might have closed it. We're not going to show the demo, but there's a button you can hit in GitHub to you can see we can push fails. We can push fails into our action runner. At least that connection works. By the way, there's great logging in GitHub. It identifies exactly what your issue is. My issue is my secrets aren't set up right, so I'm gonna have to fix them.
To be fair, we were playing before we went live like fools, and I said, "Could you trade? What happens if you change that?" And you're like, "Oh, no problem." And then like, problem, right?
That's how it goes. Yeah. So this is all here. I have some really cool examples on some other repos as well that doing things like building these things in action runners and then pushing the results to a website, for example. Very, very cool stuff.
100%.
Okay. Last thing I want to show, just to kind of close the demo out, we'll jump into PowerBI. Let's just make sure we can connect to it. This is probably, everyone's like, okay, I know exactly how this works, but that's all right. Okay. PowerBI is trying to get me to sign in. There we go. All right. So I just, get data from SQL Server. Okay. Use my database creds. Like I said, if you're doing this in prod, you probably don't want to use SA.
Yeah.
For security reasons, but for our demo, it's okay. I'll just grab my password. That's
you're
nice.
Blowing it away all the time, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. You can add steps to your Docker build and all that stuff if you feel so inclined, right? To make it a little more secure. All right, so we're going to just pull our final tables, which are these two, customers and orders, and we'll just hit load. I actually have not like visualized any of this stuff, so we're gonna end at this state. But now we can see here's our data, right? Very, very cool. Here's our orders, and let's see if Power BI was smart enough. Look at that; they're even related to each other.
What?
So I know. So very cool. That's the basics. What we're able to do is just build the dbt project in a container, connect to it, and now we got Power BI rolling, on that as well.
Sure.
Okay, that is the end of the demo.
Awesome. So, a question. So you can call from a dbt, store procedures, right? And we talked about you could call like APIs, right?
Store procedures, yes. APIs, it depends on how clever you are. I've never done that.
Okay.
But store procedures, yes.
Okay.
So in fact, I do that all the time in production. Like basically when X model completes, execute the store procedure as opposed to it.
Okay. So where I was going was, all right, so we finished loading. Can we call the API that then loads the table that's in the Power BI service using the XMLA endpoint or the APIs that we have there? Whoa, what did I just do?
You definitely could.
Yeah.
Because behind the scenes, it's just Python. It's SQL and Python, so you probably use Python to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit beyond my skill level with Python, but yes, it's possible.
Okay. Awesome. So we can completely dynamically build out databases. We can then use those dynamically generated databases to load and manage and do like comparisons potentially inside of Power BI. So we could fully do a deployment, some kind of like mentally walking through why I'd want to do this. So let's say I have a huge financial model with very complex row level security, and I'm about to make a change to that model. I could deploy it. I could refresh it onto all new capacities, right? I could then write my own scripts that do a comparison and validate if there's any issues. And if there's not, then send it down the happy path, right?
Yeah. Now, one thing I will call out is that dbt is great for inside the database, and as soon as you start getting outside of the database, you may want to consider tools like Airflow or Dagster to kind of run all of those things in the right order. I know, the Microsoft instinct is like, well, we can do everything in one place. Let's do it in one place. Generally, it's a little bit more decoupled from a dbt perspective. So yes, you can do a lot of those things. I'm not sure I'd recommend it.
Okay.
But just
okay, and actually that's a good point, and we're actually going to go back to head to head on this, so we can actually have a conversation about this topic. So I do prefer, because it sounds like we have a differing opinion, and I'd like to get your take on this to see if I'm off or if we could establish some common ground on this. So I like a more tightly coupled solution where things are fully integrated. I'm not having to go from, or I like to minimize my transfers from one tool to another. So, for example, I'm tasking my dbt developers to build an integration so that they can call the APIs right within dbt. So when loads get done, they load the table in Power BI or in analysis service or wherever it is. Your contention is that dbt should finish or what's your contention? I want to put words in your mouth.
I mean, I would say that best practice with dbt kind of ends at the database.
Okay.
And if you're going to be orchestrating things downstream of that, you should consider adding another tool to your tool belt. But it's not a, I mean, if you think about it carefully, I'm sure you could blend it that way.
Okay.
I would be reticent to do that. But
and that's fair enough. And you said the tools you'd recommend are Airflow and you said another one I missed.
Dagster is kind of like, I hate to say this to the Airflow folks, but Dagster is kind of like Airflow 2.0. So
okay.
It's pretty good.
So apologies if you're on the Airflow team and listening to this.
Yeah, exactly.
There's no insults intended here.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
But maybe check out the Dagster solution and add some features there. Just saying.
Yeah. Dagster is great. Dagster.
Oh, Dagster.
Yeah.
Not like the murderer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Not Dexter. No.
No, not like Dexter. That's pretty funny though. Yeah.
Oh man. So I am all about dbt because it just automates so much of the work that used to be something that was a huge time sink for developers, right? Like running all your loads, running all your processes, heck, creating a test environment and be able to do regression testing to make sure that you don't have issues. That used to always be either impossible or really hard and really expensive. Now, you just showed us how easy it is to spin up a new resource, do the deployments, and then allow us to do our own integration testing and spin those down when we don't need to have those. So we can have those as part of our pipelines, right?
Yeah, and there's actually a great example of how that works in the SQL Server adapter. I'll share.
Oh, okay. Let's go back to the screen.
Oh, do you want me to jump to a couple places? I can show a few.
Yeah, go ahead. We're sharing your screen again.
Okay, hang on. Let me jump in.
Okay.
So GitHub. Jump into this one. Oops. View. Here we go. dbt SQL Server. So this is the adapter for dbt that fits it into SQL Server. And one thing that's really cool about it, especially for those of you that are into unit tests and things like that, it does have a really cool example of how to use the Python library tox to kind of do end-to-end testing with your pipeline. But again, it really depends on how deep you want to get into that. It's very, very cool how this all works.
Oh, that is awesome.
So there's this one, and then there's something. Yeah, this one is great. The maintainers are awesome. And then I'll call out one other thing too while we're here.
let's just jump back to this repo. So they actually have, if for those using Azure DevOps, they've got a great example of how to set up your Azure DevOps pipeline in this repo.
Okay.
Talking about what your profile needs to look like, setting up your all your workflows in the Azure pipeline, Azure Resource Manager, etc. I'm not an expert in this stuff, but there's some great examples there. And the other part I want to talk about is dbt has kind of baked in libraries called like dbt utils is one of them, which has like a bunch of things like extra tests and so on. This is T-SQL utils is a shim for that because one of the things that SQL Server struggles with is you cannot do nested CTEs like Snowflake, Redshift. They support those. SQL Server does not. And so a lot of the patterns you see in the tests use this nested CTE pattern, which SQL Server doesn't let you do.
Okay.
So what's really cool is this has a bunch of shims for dbt utils, dbt date, dbt expectations, which is a package made by this company called Great Expectations, which lets you do statistical testing on test results. Like, give me an error if more than 5% of records meet this criteria, stuff like that. Kind of a little more data science-y. And then dbt audit helper. So you can kind of see, hey, here's all the macros that are supported, right? So there's a bunch of extra tests in dbt utils that can be extended with these packages, right? Or that are applied to your project, right? Looking at relationships, not null where something is true. Obviously this one doesn't work, get relations by pattern, but there's a bunch of other ones that do work, right? It has a really nice SQL generator called a date spine. So you can basically just say, give me a date spine from date A to date B. Those of you that are in Power BI are probably like, well, I just do that in DAX anyway, so I'm not going to worry about it. But, it has a nice SQL generator for those that are less DAX friendly, a lot of other fun stuff, like a select star macro and stuff like that. So,
oh, wow.
Lots of fun stuff. Like I said, it's not all supported just because of some SQL Server stuff, how it works. They don't work yet, but obviously they do take PRs if you feel so inclined.
Well, this is absolutely fantastic. And you did mention, and I hate to cut you off, but we're kind of wrapping down here or running to the end here. You mentioned on Twitter about a new addition at dbt today that was announced.
Oh yeah, so they did acquire this company Transform.co, which is dbt. Their kind of next step is they're going to the semantic layer.
Okay.
Really that means kind of going head to head with DAX. So I wish them luck. It's a very hard space,
yeah.
Right? So we'll see where that goes. But
okay.
They've been building that out for the last year and a half. It's very, very cool stuff.
Yeah. Oh, that's absolutely fantastic. And then so this is the semantic layer. All of this is tuned for SQL. It works really well with SQL Server. You just showed us that. In my experience, and I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, this was designed and built for Snowflake. Am I right? dbt?
So I think the kind of there's a whole bunch of adapters supported today, but Snowflake, Redshift, and BigQuery were kind of the first three that were supported. Kind of the local development workflow is on Postgres.
Okay.
So it has a pretty broad set of support. Actually, we can do a quick search. dbt cloud adapters. Let's just see what they are. I know Databricks has recently been added. Okay, so here is the supported adapters. So they do have Synapse. This is not cloud ready yet, but it is. You can use it locally, like I just showed you.
Okay.
Although speaking of Synapse, there is some expectations that it will be launched in dbt Cloud sometime this year. Do I know when? No, but it is. I know that the work is happening.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing about Azure Synapse and Databricks. Although I thought I saw that Databricks was already certified, but apparently it's not. So
no, this is it's in here. Hang on, this is just like this doesn't have the cloud reference.
Okay.
There's a list somewhere else that has which ones are eligible for cloud, and it's slightly different. But these are kind of like the verified adapters,
right? And then here's the community supported adapters. There's a ton of them, right?
Okay.
So, you know, kind of wherever you're at, you can pretty much get dbt in there, which is pretty neat. Like, yeah, let's see. Even, yeah, SQLite, DuckDB, bunch of embedded stuff, Materialize, which is doing some really cool streaming data. Whatever floats your boat, it's all in there.
Oh, this is fantastic. So again, this is your now I have classically thought of this as data engineering work. I think they're trying to say they coined the phrase analytics engineering.
Yeah, sure.
That makes me so angry, but okay. I don't have the marketing budget that a company like dbt does with their venture capitalist money.
Sure.
So it's working in the data layer, but if you still need to have like an analytical model or tabular model that sits on top of that, like that for the DAX or the semantic layer, I guess they now have a semantic layer they're going to start to add in. That's going to be a different tooling, right?
Yeah, I think it'll be pretty well integrated. You know, typically, you know, I'll say my workflow with dbt is that I push as much of it into SQL as I can. So what I mean by that is my DAX is as simple as I can possibly make it.
Agreed. Yep.
And so what that means is I'll usually do like a set of pre-aggregates, like pre-aggregated, like kind of like cubes basically, inside of dbt. So like kind of my last step will be build the analytical views that then just plug literally as a select star right into Power BI. That's kind of my general way of working with it. It just depends on, you know, the governance and you know, controls and handoffs at your company, you know, how deep you can get into the underlying data.
Well, Jacob, this has just been absolutely fantastic. Before we find out what you got coming on next and stuff like that, I do want to just put in a quick plug. Next week, Miguel Myers is going to be on here. He's going to be talking about the visual evolution of Power BI. Frankly, he's done a few meetings of these already that you can check out. Please check those out and come back and ask questions. It's going to be absolutely fabulous. I'm really looking forward to that conversation as well. But Jacob, thank you so much for taking time out of your day, taking time to set all this stuff up and show this to people. I really appreciate this. Do you have any? Are you speaking anywhere else? Do you have anything else going on that we should be plugging? I'm happy to.
Sure. Yeah, I've actually been working on a little side project with dbt and DuckDB and some other stuff that I've been kind of calling MDS in a box. You can check it out. It's mdsinabox.com. I'll just share it real quick so you can see it. What this is it's an MBA simulator, but the whole kind of end-to-end piece actually runs in a GitHub action. So all the way from data extraction, loading, transformation, and visualization, all kind of in one mono repo. So I've kind of been pulling the thread on how that works. Lots of cool kind of stuff here, you know, analytics and whatever. So yeah, definitely check that out. It's open source as well, so you can see all the code, you know, fork it, you know, build it locally, however you want. So that's kind of where I've been spending a little bit of time lately, and it's been super cool.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jacob, as I said, for coming out. We'll definitely check that out. The link is in the chat, so everybody go check this out. Provide feedback. Let us know. How is it? Like, love to hear more about this stuff. Thank you guys for taking the time to join us today and have lunch with us.
All right. Thanks, Chris. Really appreciate it.
You bet. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Peace. Baker Tilly Digital combines strategic industry insight and advanced technical expertise to uncover and solve your digital transformation challenges. If you're interested in learning more, check out our website at bakertilly.com/digital.